walk through some slides I've prepared, and happy to take any questions about some of the experiences we've been having as we move to the cloud and are considering our digital and digitization strategy at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. All right, so let's begin here. Just a little bit about us. Welcome from sunny Ontario, Canada. It's actually pretty cold today, almost -20. So nice to hear some of the others enjoying the sun in sunnier parts of the world today. The conference has been very interesting so far, listening in. I like that. The open data was very, very interesting. Similar issues here in Ontario. The Assembly I work in represents almost 15 million Ontarians and is made up of 124 members of provincial parliament. It's a fairly large parliament. There are almost 400 staff approximately who work at the Assembly, plus of course all of the political staff and their staff, constituency offices. It's a pretty big machine. The Assembly's, of course, main responsibilities: debating, passing legislation. I know everyone here knows the role, the House and of the parliaments. And we meet in downtown Toronto in Queen's Park, right down at the bottom there of the map. But of course, constituency offices for members are sprinkled throughout the province. And a lot of work happens remotely now, of course, since the beginning of the pandemic. Supporting the Assembly is the Office of the Legislative Assembly, a sort of permanent ongoing professional staff, administrative staff, provide all sorts of services from broadcasting to precinct properties to, of course, information technology and information services, which I represent, and I'll talk to you more today. So there are 4 major divisions at the Assembly, and I'm the director of the Information Services branch. I work closely with my colleagues in technology services, working more on the hardware and network and cybersecurity, as well as we have an internal legislative library and a research service. And together we're working on a number of fronts to help modernize on Ontario's Parliament, and figure out what comes next as we continue down this journey. Inside of my branch, excuse me, in information services, we have about 30 staff, and our in-house teams, we are very fortunate, include a systems development or in-house programming group. We have editors and web writers who focus on the website and digital content, a content management team who help fuel the library's collections and manage the flow of documents that we save and collect and preserve. And we have a small but mighty team focused on not only records management, but looking at issues of accessibility and open parliament, which is similar to the open data conversation that we just heard. So we began our journey, or at least a big jump forward in our journey to go to the cloud to provide better and more digital services in 2018, when we hit a tipping point in Ontario. Our in-house teams were struggling. There was simply so much built up over time, so many different legacy applications, on-prem systems, different programming languages. Really, you can think of it, and we were probably using it somewhere in Ontario. And this, of course, raised a whole number of challenges for staff, both technical and users. Imagine the onboarding experience as a general administrative person, have to learn all these different interfaces, these systems, sometimes to do very simple tasks. Of course, the move, many of us were able to work remotely, work from home, essential staff on site during the pandemic. And we quickly realized when it began for us around March 2020 that the on-prem systems were very difficult to access remotely, did not present very well, couldn't get it through a browser, let alone VPN was very difficult to use. And hiring, cross-training, onboarding new staff in this environment, very difficult. So we knew we needed to make some changes here and help move us in a more sort of coordinated fashion forwards with our digital strategy. So we came up with this program where we connected a number of different projects together under an application modernization program. And we tried to look at some 3 major goals for every one of our systems and sort of digital services, looking not only at the technology, but who's involved, how are they doing it, how are users accessing it, where do we want to go with this process, what's useful in the future. Each system was analyzed essentially as a small project through a consistent approach I'll show you, looking at could we retire, update, fix, basically what would the modernization strategy be. We also looked at standardization. If we had an old system or service that had been sort of bespoke or custom built at some time, how could we bring it into a more standard approach so it could be better supported, better maintained, and better understood by both users and technical staff. And of course, having 57 systems is just a ridiculous amount of things in the air, balls to juggle every day for all of these technical teams. And they certainly wanted to look at ways that we could streamline and consolidate a lot of these functions and make the systems easier. Some days felt a bit like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and we really needed to get out of that business and wanted to innovate and spend more time looking at what is transformation really about, instead of, oh no, I got to patch this and update this and patch this and patch this and keep this running and that sort of complexity. So again, a sort of key theme here in my presentation is consistency. And we very early on recognized that every project would need to follow a similar approach, that we wanted to make sure we had not only the right documentation, but consistent documentation, looking at all of our systems as a portfolio, helping others to not only cross-train and support. We have a service desk, we have support teams who receive calls from members who may be on the road or their staff having issues at all hours. How do we make sure they have the information they need to help end users? Of course, onboarding new staff as well, really important to make sure that they can function, they can work properly in our environment. So we looked at taking cues from other government project processes and best practices in the technology industry, and looked at how we could move every system and service through a series of checkpoints, which you can sort of see here in some major steps. And every step would be documented. We'd have dates attached. We'd have governance groups, the correct meetings, and a way to go through so that delivery was consistent and better trackable. We got better and better at each project each time we went through this same funnel over and over. And so we've been sort of repeating this process, working our way through the Assembly's portfolio of applications. Of course, inside every project, we sort of flip the method. I'm sure those here have heard of an agile development process before. I just wanted to put it here, not to say that it's a wonderful thing. In general, it has pros and cons, but it certainly worked really well for us in Ontario. And I think the reason is that we didn't know in all cases how best to modernize certain applications at the start. So we would, collect business requirements from client branches, hear feedback from members and their staff. And a lot of them were sort of wish lists. So it would be great if this could be simpler, or I could do this faster, but not really a specific technical requirement. We had to figure this out. How do you end up presenting this? Is this one system or two systems? Is this folding these together in this way? Or is this a brand new technology we now need to go and build or procure? How we did this was collecting these requirements, having this backlog, and using this sort of sprint cycle process every 3 or 4 weeks, getting back together, looking at what we're building, showing this to the clients, giving them a chance to play test, to try it, to provide feedback. That's great. Didn't like that. This is interesting. Didn't even understand what this part was about, and putting that back into the sort of the hopper, being able to then continue iterating and defining and getting better. All while having strong governance from management and executive management at the Assembly as we went through some of these twists and turns. And I think this has been absolutely key. There was really no way to define all of what we were going to do, 4 years ago. We've learned a lot along the way and been able to incorporate those lessons every time we go forward with a new project. You may be curious to see we're moving into this cloud environment, and in Ontario's case, we're leveraging Microsoft's technologies. There's data centers here in Canada and we're working very closely with not only Microsoft Canada, but some other vendors who specialize in Microsoft systems. And our in-house teams as well have had to go on through a learning and development journey over the last few years, picking up new skills and understanding how best to use this sort of Microsoft toolbox to enable our work. And I think what's been most interesting has been the sort of purple area here you see on the screen. And that's because it's allowed us to do the customizations and the creation of very specific parliamentary process that you can't get out of the box. I like to say to my board that there is no such thing as Microsoft Parliament. Perhaps everybody here wished there was, so do I. Doesn't exist, and essentially many assemblies around the world are all trying to create this software. Maybe if some of us want to get together and sell it, there might be a future business model there. I think that the use of the technology, it has to be a combination between trying to standardize with the off-the-shelf solutions, but then just at the very tip, customizing them in a way that helps you get done some of these services that you couldn't get any other way. So we're in year 4 of this program now. I think we've had some huge successes. We've streamlined already the portfolio from the 57 we started with down to a couple dozen today. There's just over 20, and the journey continues. We've moved to the cloud, removed the need for VPN, used a lot and leveraged a lot of the security and mechanisms that Microsoft's cloud offers us. We have all of the sign-on now and the multi-factor authentication and some amazing tools we would have never, been able to get ourselves with older on-premise systems and servers. We've decommissioned old systems. And now teams are able, you can sort of see here, to start understanding, especially end users, these different systems in a consistent way, that every time you approach them, if you've got familiarity using the, even Microsoft Word, you've already learned a lot of the interface and will hopefully be able to recognize many of the ways in which these applications run. There's certainly more customizations that are done. Recently, due to the pandemic and the need to screen visitors into the building, we were tasked with creating a brand new application so that you could, sort of have a passport on your phone to enter the building. We had to roll this out in record time, and it was completely built in-house using the Microsoft tools with internal staff at no additional cost, and perfectly tailored for our organization, useful for our security, our health screening folks, and just sort of tracking through business continuity who was in the building and where they were going. So this type of information and the ability to use these services, I think you start to leverage and you gain speed the more and more you use it and the more consistently you use it. So today, essentially, we're making our way around the assembly, fixing up, modernizing. The journey continues. Each system has sort of a review and then goes through that process of governance and technology review, and then a sprint development, sort of agile development process to go from where it is to where it needs to go. And most importantly, each team is multidisciplinary. So each project team has members of not only folks on the IT side and in information services, but the actual client branch, whether it's someone in Hansard or procedural services, the sergeant at arms. We're working closely with each group to make sure that the end user is incorporated and is a part of the design process. So here it sort of is in sum, from beginning to end, looking, as I said, at each step has been so important for us. Doing it consistently over the years, working with partners who have helped train our staff, as well as like technical and non-technical. Ongoing end user training is so important, especially in this time as positions and people change. And all of these sort of consistencies are helping us to evolve our systems and figure out what's next. So I think the future is really more of this forever. Hopefully less hump projects, so to speak, and more regular updates, regular new feature incorporations, regular bug, patches and updates and all of those things. And because we are a part of this Microsoft cloud, Microsoft as well releases new features to some of its main platforms on a regular basis. And we're able to take advantage of some of those cloud services right away. And that's excellent. So, a big shift moving from something like old file folders into OneDrive. But I would say it's been a very positive experience to go through that effort. The pandemic certainly escalated that. And it's made our lives a lot easier. And now people can start to see, oh, can we do this? Maybe can we have some more of that? And behind the scenes, the Microsoft environment gives us things like a central database, a common warehouse where different applications can now access and pull in legislative information, administrative information about members, in ways that we didn't have before because we had 57 little silos. So it's helping to bring both our data and our infrastructure together in a new way.